Welcome back. This is segment 2 here on Plane Time with Ben Coleman, your host, and Florida Aviation Network from the Gizmo Productions USA studios in Oviedo. And hopefully you saw the first segment. We're going to roll right into the second segment with an emphasis on soaring planes, sailplanes, and airworthiness. And with our wonderful guest, our stand-in guest, Bob Jex today, we're going to bat that around quite a bit and a little bit more about why you as a human individual should get involved with soaring and some of the virtues and some of the things that you maybe have not thought about. But Bob, during the break, we were talking a little bit about some of the majority of all manufacturers of these gliders are not in the US of A.
Yeah, there's only a few glider manufacturers that are in the U.S., Schweitzer being one of them. Most of the other ones are from offshore, and these aircraft are brought in crates, they're assembled, they're flown under special airworthiness permissions, and they're maintained to U.S. standards, and they fly in our airspace safely and by expert pilots that learned how to fly them, sometimes in this country, sometimes in the country where they were produced.
And Bob, you know, sometimes gliders are very, very long and sleek, but there are also some little short gliders as well, as we see on our program.
There's a couple of little ones out there, and I've not flown this one. I hear that it handles quite nicely. It's what you would call short coupled because there's almost no empennage on this aircraft, but it is balanced beautifully. And the guy who flies it is quite an expert at flying it, and he was flying in the Seminole Lake Soaring Championships.
I'm sure that the CG was very, very tight. I don't know what the CG range is, but it's the center of gravity on a machine like that has got to be tricky, and that's what kind of takes us back to airworthiness. And let's go ahead and get that out right now. What is the definition of airworthiness? What does airworthy mean?
It's in
everybody.
The aircraft meets its
type design and what
and is in
and is a condition for safe operation. They beat you to it, Bob.
Properly maintained.
Not definition of airworthy. The definition, but have you ever heard the term, you can repair something, but you have to make it equal to or better than the original? You ever heard that?
I've heard that.
Equal to or better than the original. No, you can't do that. Now you've altered it. It's got to be equal to the original strength. It's not better than. It can't be less than. It's got to be equal to the original strength. So it's little things like that that we make things more difficult for ourselves in this business. But a mechanic on a glider without a motor, not a motor glider, but a straight glider, has got to be one of the most rewarding occupations in the world.
I would imagine that some of the mechanics that repair these gliders also fly them. That would be extraordinarily rewarding. Point of regulation, a glider with a motor is still categorized as a glider.
Mm-hmm. It just happens to have an engine tucked away somewhere in its fuselage or in the nose.
There's two types of engines that are mounted on gliders today. One is a launch engine or a launch motor. The other one is a sustainer motor, usually a little less powerful.
And it's really kind of cool. There's one of them, I forget the name of the manufacturer. Maybe it's a Stemp. But the propeller folds back into the nose, and it does have an engine in the nose of the glider, but it's only to launch. They stow it, shut the engine down, and the blades actually fold back into and streamline along the nose of the aircraft. But Bob, do you think a glider has to have an annual inspection?
A certificated glider would certainly have to have an annual inspection. And that inspection can be performed by a mechanic with an airframe rating. A glider with a motor would also have, a certificated glider would have to have an annual inspection, but the motor would have to be inspected by somebody with a power plant rating.
And that's true. See, we pick these things up, we learn these things all the time. And one of the things that people don't always realize, and it's not difficult to get a airframe and power plant certificate or a mechanic's license with the FAA, but you got to be extremely dedicated, because you either go to an approved Part 147 school that's kind of is fast tracked, and you can get out of that in probably 30 months. But if you are out in the field doing it by your experience, you have to have 18 months for an A, 18 months for a P, or 30 months for an A and P. Can you get just your power plant rating, Bob?
I suppose you could, but in the glider community, that might be a little bit of a challenge. One good place for an aspiring mechanic to start out would be to observe operations, including the assembly and disassembly of a glider. You do not have to be a mechanic to assemble or disassemble a glider, but if you want to learn the systems and the inner workings of the machine, a great place to do it is when they're putting one together or taking one apart. That is a very common operation in the commercial world, and especially in competition. If a glider has to land out, it's no big deal as long as it isn't damaged on the landing. A disassembly and trailering back to a place where it can be launched again, that's an everyday thing.
And Bob, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time, Benji.
Okay, do you have to have both your airframe and power plant license to be a mechanic?
No, you do not.
You can get one at a time. You can do it a la carte. You can get just your airframe license, and all you have to do is just pass a general and an airframe test. You can get just your power plant license, general and power plant. So you don't have to gobble the whole elephant down in one foul swoop. Let's just eat him or her one at a time, one bite at a time. But I do encourage folks to get the airframe. Probably, I'm going to say, is more difficult because there's so many different aspects, manufacturers that you're dealing with, and right up to the point where it gets to the firewall, you can do just so much as an airframe mechanic, but you can't sign off or endorse legally anything to do with the power plant assembly. Can you accessories?
Boy, if the accessories are certificated or STC'd for the aircraft, you probably cannot.
Okay. Well, I tell you, it's a multitude of information that's all available. Where would I go, Bob, if I really wanted to dig into this about how to be a mechanic? Where would I go?
I'd go into the FARs to start with.
FARs, what's that? Is that
the Federal Aviation Regulations. You know what else I would do? I would start a conversation with mechanics that I knew.
And how about just going to hang out around airplanes?
You'll learn a lot.
Just go hang out at the airport. And we encourage parents to take their kids if they're interested, even if they're not. If you're interested, make it available to them to learn a little bit more about the jargon, the lingo. What's the difference between a low toe and a high toe in gliders?
It depends on where the glider sits in the slipstream of the towing aircraft. That's the high toe position, low toe position. The altitude of the tow can be defined also in the brief before the tow. One thing I want to say about a place like Seminole Lake is that it's a very open and inviting community. They welcome you with open arms. They'll bring you in under their wing, show them you're interested, get to meet the people out there, and show up, be a regular member, volunteer, raise your hand, and look over the shoulder of people without distracting them, and learn what is going on. And that's how you start to get involved.
Well, and they're always, typically, you'll find people are welcoming wherever you are in aviation. to a point. There's some security concerns. Security is part of the rule, but typically just go to the airport, start asking around. If you know somebody that's in the industry, go have a chat with them. And I know that Sean is going to have a lot more to say about this when we do catch him, and I believe we are going to have him at Sun and Fun. Sun and Fun this year is
April 1st, that's a Tuesday, to April 6th, which is Sunday. And that'll be Sun and Fun 51. It'll be a really, really cool get-together.
Sun and Fun. I guess we just gave them a plug, so we should continue to give them a plug as well as the Polk County Public School System.
Good people, and they are interested in getting the next generation of pilots and mechanics into this industry that is so hungry for them.
You know, and Bob, I understand that there's a high school, an actual high school at Lakeland Linder Regional Airport.
The Central Florida
International
Aviation
Airport.
Academy.
Did you hear what I just said? Lakeland Linder Regional? It's Lakeland Linder International Airport now.
Yep, because they operate those big airliners that say Prime on the side of them.
And they do have some scheduled service out of there up to like Connecticut.
Just recently started.
And I think Tennessee.
Yeah.
Something. There's a Velo or Velo. I'm not sure if I pronounced it. A Velo. But it's such a great time to be in aviation and aerospace. There's a lot going on, and I hope that the folks get back out of space. But aerospace and aviation is putting your big toe in the water for space. And space, a lot of folks are of the opinion, I don't know why we're wasting all that time and money and effort to go to space. Can't live out there. Well, really, I mean,
it's all got to start somewhere. And with the glider pilots that are coming up through the system, a book that I want to put out for your consideration is the FAA's new release of the Glider Flying Handbook. They just re-released it in 2024. It's got a tremendous amount of information that an aspiring glider pilot would need to know, whether they're going at the sport pilot level, private, or as high as commercial.
There's actually, if you were to do a search, whatever search engine, Yahoo, Google, whatever, do a search for sailplane flying, and there's used to be a Perlin project going on in South America, and it was seeking the altitude record. I think they went up to they had plans to go to 90,000 feet in a glider. But it's I don't think they made it all. The plan was to go to 90, but it's just such a fascinating sport. It really is, and it is a sport. I'm trying to get us turned back into the mechanical aspects of this because of the importance of lubrication. Do you realize that there are some airworthiness directives that require something as simple as lubricating a certain point on an airframe that hasn't been addressed by the manufacturer appropriately, and the FAA has found that there has been some service difficulties in whatever control that was. So it's a network of information and sharing information, and I would encourage, I tell you what, I'm going to throw this out there and see if you give me a amen or a hallelujah or something, but the ultimate would be to get a 14-year-old woman, boy, girl, female, male, whatever gender you want to call yourself, to get involved with sailplanes, as well as your airframe license, your airframe mechanics license. Clean, simple, and the general information for your A&P, the general is probably the most difficult test that there is in all of our aviation system. But it's a very encompassing test. You have to know physics. Who would have thought a mechanic needs to know physics? You need to know physics for your general application.
That's a huge challenge for any young person, is to get both a pilot certificate and a mechanic certificate at a very early age. But once you do, and you're going to have to work your butt off to get those ratings, once you do, a whole new world begins to open up for you. There will be shortages of personnel in many aviation segments in the coming years. There are facets of aviation that are beginning to develop now that didn't even exist 10 years ago, and they're starting to become mainstream. The gliding community will always live, as the glider ports themselves live, on the periphery of aviation, and yet it's the roots of what we do today in aviation. It all started with, well, of course, the Montgolfier brothers in 1783 with balloons, but in a practical sense, it started with the Wright brothers flying gliders and then adding a motor to their glider. Their mechanic, Charles Taylor, was a genius, as were the Wright brothers themselves. And they have inspired countless generations. Think of all that's happened in the 100 years that took place since the first Wright brothers flights on, Kill Devil Hill and Kitty Hawk, North Carolina.
We've learned a lot. We have learned a lot, and but we haven't learned it all. We're
There's still
learning more.
so much more.
As far as the maintenance requirements on a glider, what can a pilot do or not do on a glider? Big question. Here's something that people don't realize. Do mechanics determine whether or not an aircraft is airworthy or not?
That's a great question, and the mechanics will sign off maintenance that they performed, but it's actually the pilot in command on the next flight that returns it to service. A pilot can perform certain preventive maintenance actions on their aircraft, not just a glider, but a regular airplane too. They can, for example, add oil. They can check the air and refill air in the tires. They can polish the canopy. They can do a lot of things that don't involve opening up hydraulic systems or complex assembly operations. Those would require a mechanic.
Can they change a tire?
Yes, they can.
Not just air it up, they can change the whole tire?
They can change the tire because it doesn't necessarily open up the brake system for that change.
But now here's the sneaky part. They can change the tire, but they have to do it to the same level of expertise as an airframe mechanic would. They have to use the manufacturer's recommendations, have to use the proper tools, have to use the proper lubricants. And if you don't know what you're doing, if you've never done it before under supervision, that's another thing. You can't just go out there and, I've got the book, I guess, I can figure it out. No, that's not the way we do it. You have to do it under supervision the first time, and then you're qualified to do it the second time on your own.
This is where some guys are turned on by the experimental world, where some of the rules are relaxed for the maintenance requirements. But if you are operating an experimental aircraft and maintaining it, you assume some of the risk that is ordinarily otherwise shared with the other professionals in the industry, such as the mechanics. But a pilot who is a builder can get a repairman certificate and make his own repairs, do his own condition inspection.
Or
her. But he or she assumes that risk of airworthiness for their experimental aircraft.
And as far as, I'm Joe Smith. I want to get involved with this, and I've been fascinated by this flight thing since I was a boy. Can I build my own glider?
Sure.
You mean there's experimental amateur-built gliders out in the world?
Absolutely, there's out there. There are two types of. Let's look at the light sport world. There's light sport experimental, light sport special. Light sport special is built in a factory to what are called consensus standards. Light sport experimental is built by Joe Sixpack, the guy in his garage with sawhorses for jigs, and that's an experimental airworthiness standard that is somewhat relaxed. It doesn't have to uphold to the consensus standards, but it certainly needs to be checked by somebody who knows what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. That's advisable when you're a couple thousand feet up in the air and you hear something pop. You better know what that pop was.
The glider community, probably more than most other communities except the skydiving community, they fly with parachutes in many cases. Because something could go wrong and they might not be able to make a safe landing, it might be necessary to bail out from the aircraft. It doesn't normally happen, but they have that option that they might not otherwise have.
And they push the limits on these. These are machines. These are aircraft, and they do beautiful aerobatics. Aerobatics in a glider?
There was a famous glider pilot named Manfred Radius who did a beautiful routine. He had authorization to put smoke generators out on his wingtips. They would tow him up to a very high altitude, and he would perform air shows in absolute silence. They'd play music just to entertain the crowd, but the aircraft itself didn't make the normal sounds of diving and climbing and spinning that you often hear in combination with any conventional air show. Manfred Radius had a different level of appeal. Mm-hmm. He could fly loops where he would connect the smoke streams from his wingtips for multiple loops, and it was gorgeous to watch him.
Mm-hmm. It was literally like dancing. He was dancing in the sky.
Yeah, he was amazing, and he would make that glider he would fly an inspirational show.
Manfred's still around. I don't know how much longer he's going to be flying air shows, but I hope that he's here this year. And hopefully you'll be there at Sun and Fun at Lakeland in April. But Bob, the experimental and let me rephrase that. In general aviation, the FAA came up with an idea on how to make it more affordable and have an aviation system that wasn't quite as restrictive as your standard category aircraft, and you're getting your full-fledged private pilot certificate. They came up with this light sport thing. Does light sport, does that spill over into the glider world?
It sure
as well?
does. Even before light sport, they had the recreational pilot certificate, which really fizzled. I think I have more fingers on my hand than the number of recreational pilots that we certificate in the United States every year. Mm-hmm. So whereas recreational fizzled out, they had industry participation, EAA notably, and AOPA to develop the standards for the light sport industry. And light sport allows you to do some of the things that they had hoped recreational would allow. Light sport allows you to fly, for example, with a driver's license rather than a medical certificate. Mm-hmm. In gliders, you didn't, as I said earlier, you don't need a medical certificate to fly a glider, fortunately. But you do need at least a driver's license or a medical certificate to fly powered aircraft at higher levels. Mm-hmm. In the sport pilot world, you can get rated to fly gliders. There are some speed limitations on gliders at the sport pilot level, but you can get endorsements to overcome them. The certification process is simpler. The regulatory process is simpler for the light sport world versus the conventional, what I call the conventional world. And before you go down that path of getting a light sport or sport pilot rating or a light sport aircraft, understand that sport pilot aviation is not recognized internationally. There are other countries that do recognize our sport pilot industry and our light sport aircraft, but most other countries do not. Notably, Europe doesn't yet recognize the light sport thing. So be careful before you spend a lot of money and time going into that limited capability of sport aviation. The U.S. has recognized the need for a change. They are modernizing the sport pilot rules and in a way that will encompass more aircraft than are currently encompassed under the current body of regulations. We're very excited to see what these changes look like. I've got my eye on it. I will brief my volunteer audiences on what that contains, and I hope to be briefing you very, very soon on what this so-called mosaic rule will contain. We're very excited to see it happen, hopefully this year. But that's another topic for another day.
Bob, tell me a little bit about the Wings program. And
I'd love to.
What are the virtues of the Wings program, and does that apply to soaring aircraft? And I'm not even going to bring up Part 103, ultralights. That's a whole new
That's a
subject.
whole nother thing.
That's a different day.
The WINGS program, in a nutshell, is the FAA's legacy program for pilot proficiency for a lifetime, not just for 1 or 2 flights. You can fly gliders, earn WINGS credit, even if you're not rated as a glider pilot, you can still earn WINGS credit towards the attainment of glider ratings and certificates. The WINGS program is normally free to participate in. Today you can earn WINGS credit for just sitting in on this presentation and many of the others that go on at Sun and Fun, both with the Florida Aviation Network and with the FAA at the Orlando field office over there at Lakeland. Please take advantage of those programs. You can earn knowledge credits, which when combined with flight credits flown in an aircraft with an instructor, you can combine the flight credits and the knowledge credits to earn what's called phases of WINGS, and every completed phase of WINGS is the equivalent of a flight review. And your regulation on that is 14 CFR 6156 Echo. And it is also a way for flight instructors to renew the recency of experience end date on their certificates, is also by participating in the WINGS program. If you want to learn about the WINGS program in detail, check out Advisory Circular AC 6191 Juliet, or ask your local WINGS Pro. I'm a WINGS Pro in the Orlando district. Talk to the people that are doing WINGS events, and even the FAST team program managers. They're all experts in the WINGS program.
Well, I tell you, if you want to get involved, there's a way. And FAST team, the safety program, do you have to be a pilot or a mechanic to volunteer to be a FAST team representative?
No, you have to show interest. That's the first and most important step in being a volunteer with the FAST team. Show interest, contribute to the safety effort. We all say that we're trying to prevent the next accident, and if we just prevent one accident, it'll all have been worth it. The volunteers are motivated by something more than that. There's camaraderie, there's communication, there's networking, there's the ability to talk to people, learn skills, especially at the Florida Aviation Network, which is a FAST team industry member, which is a more select group of industry organizations that are deeply affiliated with the FAST team. So there's a place for you in the FAST team if you wish to become involved, and I encourage you to do that. Go to www.faasafety.gov to begin getting some information.
Open the door, please. We encourage you to open the door, and this is an opportunity that not every country has. We're very unique. And Bob, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, Ben.
And stepping up to the plate. And we're going to wait to get the WINGS credit code at the conclusion of our credits on this segment, and we're going to sign it off. This is Ben Coleman, your host for this segment. Go out and soar today. Get sore. That's a joke. But anyway, go soaring, and we'll see you next interview.